diagnosed with cancer. Keep him in your prayers. Remember Paul and Lou's family, as well as Pam Mullins. Remember my grandpa. He's probably watching now. Pray for him. David Agee. Keep Paul's uncle Lonnie in your prayers. They did find cancer. So pray for him. We'll have more updates as they come, as well as his aunt Minnie. Keep her in your prayers. Miss Jane Blevins, pray for her. Miss Judy Ruggles, she has surgery on Thursday. Keep Bobby Hogg in your prayers. Bobby Hogg is battling cancer. Rosa Mulgroff, she's also battling cancer. Keep her in your prayers. Remember Mike Burnett's mom, as well as Miss Peggy Kissick and Deanna Kissick. She's not feeling well. My Uncle Ron Boyd, keep him in your prayers. The COVID situation, the upcoming ministries of Calvary. I was asked a question today. Whenever I'm asked a question by one person, I assume more people have the same question, so I'll just answer it. Someone asked, when are we going to start with the food bank? After August. At the end of August, we start with the food bank. We start gathering stuff up, and we start reaching out into the community with that. So that's the answer to that question. But pray for the upcoming ministries of Calvary. We got a lot of irons in the fire, so to speak. A lot of things going on, including one that we're going to be starting soon. We are going to take 1 week a month, and some of us are going to go minister in a nursing home down in Eastgate, give them a church service on Sunday afternoon and whatnot. So pray for that. Pray for the young people of our church, but also of our nation. Pray for our nation and our communities, the struggling churches as well as the thriving churches, and pray for the unspoken of the church. Also, keep Sarah Riley in your prayers. I spoke to her this week a couple times, actually. She was having some trouble, and she went to the emergency room. The emergency room doctors, as they do, they didn't really tell her too much. She went to her doctor, found out she had a mini heart attack. They're talking about possibly putting in a defibrillator and a pacemaker, and they told her that she has congestive heart failure. I spoke to her about that, and I explained to her that my grandfather, he's lived for 40 years with a defibrillator and a pacemaker, and people live for decades under congestive heart failure if they take care of themselves, and that kind of helped her out a little bit. But pray for Miss Sarah Riley and everything she has going on. Pray for her daughter Candace as well. Does anybody else have any prayer requests? Okay. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am. Okay. Yes, sir. Okay. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am. How is Claudia doing? Anybody else? Mike, will you open us in prayer? far as announcements go, nothing's really changed. We'll be back here Wednesday at 7 p.m. If you feel led to give, you got to give online or back in the back of the church in that box. Ladies group meets the 21st of August. Men's group meets the 12th of August. The senior ministry meets the 5th of August. And the student ministry, of course, is the second and third Sunday night of the month. The mission trip, I met with everybody. Everybody knows they're doing. Did we pass the info? We passed the info. Be in prayer for that mission trip. I know that some people it doesn't affect at all, but understand it's coming up. And here in a couple months, we're going to be having a service where we pray over those who are going, and we're going to be sending, as a church, a group of people to represent Calvary in a foreign nation. And to some people, that's not a big deal, but if you understand what that means, that's a big deal. So pray for these people who are going, that God will use them, that God will bless them, and God will move in their hearts before, during, and after this trip, and with everything that they're going to be doing. Don't forget the prayer board back in the back. Don't forget to invite people to church. Our back-to-school party is August the 7th from 12 to 2. And also, don't forget to be praying about a child's hope. I very rarely take up special offerings and do stuff like that. And when I do, it's because it's important. This organization supplies food and sends the gospel to places where normally they wouldn't get it. They have I'm not going to do it here, but they have this neat little contraption they got from, I think it's GE, that you can take a tablet and drop it in dirty, contaminated, chloria-filled water, and within 2 hours, it's clean, white, clear water, safe to drink. And they do all this stuff, and they partner with churches to make it happen. Because as you know, there's no corporation going to partner with something to send the gospel. So this is a local church-funded organization. But that is August 22nd. I'm going to be sending a group. Instead of being here on Sunday morning, they're going to go up there. But we are going to be taking up a special offering on the 15th for that. So just pray if God would move in your heart to give to that. Pray that God would tell you how much to give to that. We're not going to play a song and keep playing song until enough money's raised. We're going to just take up an offering at the end of church for that. So pray that God would move in that, and that we as a church can be a blessing in that as well. That is all of our announcements. So I am going to, do you got your mic? Well, I'm just going to get out of the way, and you're in charge.
Tell me, don't forget where you put your glasses. Years I spent in vanity and pride, caring not my Lord was crucified, knowing not it was for me he died on Calvary. Mercy there was great and grace was free, pardon there was multiplied to me. There my burdened soul found liberty at Calvary. By God's word at last my sin I learned, then I trembled at the law I'd spurned, till my guilty soul imploring turned to Calvary. Mercy there was great and grace was free, pardon there was multiplied to me. There my burdened soul found liberty at Calvary. Oh, the love that drew salvation's plan. Oh, the grace that brought it down to man. Oh, the mighty gulf that God did span at Calvary. Mercy there was great and grace was free, pardon there was multiplied to me. There my burdened soul found liberty at Calvary. Mercy there was great and grace was free, pardon there was multiplied to me. There my burdened soul found liberty at Calvary. Come out of sadness from wherever you've been. Come broken-hearted, let rescue begin. Come find your mercy, oh sinner, come kneel. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't heal. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't heal. So lay down your burdens and lay down your shame. All who are broken, lift up your face. Oh, wanderer, come home. You're not too far. So lay down your hurt, lay down your heart, come as you are. There's hope for the hopeless and all those who've strayed. Come sit at the table, come taste the grace. There's rest for the weary, a rest that endures. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't cure. So lay down your burdens, lay down your shame. All who are broken, lift up your face. Oh, wanderer, come home. You're not too far. So lay down your hurt, lay down your heart, come as you are. Come as you are. Fall in his arms. Come as you are. There's joy for the morning. Oh, sinner, be still. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't heal. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't heal. So lay down your burdens, lay down your shame. All who are broken, lift up your face. Oh, wanderer, come home. You're not too far. So lay down your hurt, lay down your heart, come as you are. Come as you are. Come as you are. Come as you are. We'll get studying on that right quick. Of course, in our study, we know that Saul is still hunting David, still wants to kill David. The hand of God is off of Saul. We are in 1 Samuel chapter 22. We know that David went to Nob, and the priest there fed them and gave him, Abimelech gave him the sword of Goliath. And David's a wanted man, and everybody knows that David's a wanted man, except some of the outcroppings of the tribes. And at Nob they did not know. And so David kind of went in there with a lie. He precipitated his demands or his needs with a lie, saying, I'm on the king's business, and really he wasn't. So when, of course, this is reviewing quickly, when Saul found out, he went up there and he killed the whole family, killed everybody there. Now, Abimelech had a son, and his son escaped. And that's where we're going to be now in chapter 22. Let me make sure. No, chapter 23. Now David is hiding, and word gets to him. He said the word gets to him and tells him that the Philistines have taken hold of the city of the tribe of Judah called Keilah. And they've taken capture of the city. They have plundered it. They have cleaned out the threshing floor. They have taken any type of food or anything of any value. The Philistines have taken that. And you find, this city goes all the way back to the time of Jacob and Joshua. And this was land that was set aside for the tribes of Judah. So it's a special area. And now the Philistines, even though David defeats them, you can't talk a snake into going back and not coming out to bite you again. You have to kill the snake, well, in my opinion. If you're a snake person and you're offended by that, just don't put a snake on me, because I'll do my best to kill it. I don't like them. But I use that language there. The Philistines, they get defeated. Goliath's but they keep coming back, and they keep coming back. And, and the Philistines really represent the kingdom of Satan, how we can defeat them, but it keeps coming back. The old devil keeps coming back and keeps attacking us, and you can never let your guard down when it comes to satanic attacks, whether it's through temptation or just wanting to sin, whether it's slothfulness or laziness or whatever that sin may be. The devil is going to keep after you and keep after you, and he will come through as a parent. He'll come through your children. He'll come through your grandchildren. He'll come through your spouse. He'll come through whatever. He'll come through church members sometimes. And so we got to keep our guard up. And you can't live this life. I have to say this. You cannot live the Christian life unarmed. And by unarmed, I mean you can't just, the only time you commune with God or godliness is within these four walls. Because if that's what you're counting on, you're facing the devil unarmed. You'll have your salvation, I get it. But you just don't have the means to a victory. So the Philistines are back. And David, even though he's running from Saul, and his life is on the line, not only him, but the couple hundred guys that's with him, they're all wanted men, but David most especially is wanted. Yet David, even though he's hiding from Saul, and theoretically this should be Saul's problem to go fight the Philistines. But, and it is, and you'll see that in a little bit. So in verse 2, the Bible says, therefore David inquired of the Lord. Now, I don't remember who prayed this evening, or maybe it was this morning, but there was one line in there that, when we pray to God, we want answers, but we want answers now. We don't want to wait. We want them now. And we're all like that. We want answers now. It doesn't work that way, especially with God. Sometimes it is now. Sometimes it's as clear as the nose on one's face. Other times, not so much. And sometimes God's silence doesn't mean He's thinking about it. It's just no. And that's the hardest one, just no. Kind of like a parent asking his dad for, can I do this? And the dad, it's so preposterous. And I've done this as a dad. I just turn and walk away. Really. Some of the stories I used to hear about Matt on the school bus, I would just throw up my hands and just walk away. Yeah, that's Matt. Yeah, you're right. You want me to send you the video, Mr. Boyd? No, that's not necessary. I know Matt. Therefore David inquired of the Lord, saying, shall I go and smite? Can I go? Do you want me to go and fight these Philistines? Or should I just wait? And I'm thinking outside of the box, but thinking as a man, God, do you want me to do this, or do you want Saul to do this? Shall I go and smite these Philistines? And the Lord real quick said unto David, go and smite the Philistines and save Keilah. Yes, go. That was good enough for David. But look what happens. And David's men said unto him, behold, we were afraid in Judah. We were afraid then. How much more then if we come to Keilah against the armies of the Philistines? So David's ready. He's trusting in Jehovah God. He's ready to go. He tells his soldiers, a band of mercenaries, and they say, well, wait a minute. Whoa, what? Tell you what, David, now, it scared the fire out of us back yonder. And now we're going to go up against this army, and they've really got a grudge against us now because we killed Goliath and we beat them in a couple of battles, and now they are assembled up there, and there's probably a lot of them, and there's not many of us. We're just too scared to go. This thing with Jamaica, I'm scared to go. I'm going. But I ain't looking forward to it. I got to be honest. I ain't looking forward to it. I've been to Jamaica. But there's a call comes ringing over the restless waves, send the light, send the light. We all know that song. So I understand these guys here. I was afraid the first time I went to Jamaica, and now I know more about Jamaica, and I'm more afraid now than I was then, but I'll go. I sure hope I come back. Then David inquired of the Lord. So David goes to God again. He had an answer. So that tells me that it's okay to go back. We have biblical example after example of people going back to God and say, okay, I got your answer the first time, but I really want to make sure this time, so I'm going to do this thing here, and if you answer that prayer, then I'll do it. And then sometimes they do it a third time. So David goes back to God, and he said to the Lord, are you sure you want me to go down here and fight the Philistines? And the Lord said, yes. It says, I'm going to deliver the Philistines into your hand in verse 4. I'm going to give you the Philistines. Well, I'll tell you what, it takes a lot of courage to be a Christian. I'm going to use the word point man, or everybody know what a point man is? Not a point guard in basketball, point man. Point man is, especially in Vietnam, and probably during the other world wars, but you have your troop, or your squad, But somebody's got to go out front and go ahead of the squad and look for the enemy before the squad gets to that point. So the point man is out here all by himself, and the enemy is around, or he could be around. Not necessary, but they could be there, and they're hidden because they know you're coming. So you're the first guy that's going to get hit. So in Vietnam, what they would do is, because of the canopy of all the, the lush trees in the tropic, the point man would just go through and just shoot up into the trees as he went. And sometimes bodies would fall. Because the point man is scared, and that's his job to make sure that these guys don't walk into that same trap. And a lot of your point guys got killed too. David's the point guard. He's the point man here. Verse 5, so David and his men went to Keilah, and he fought with the Philistines, and he brought away their cattle, and he smote them, and he defeated them again, and they took all their stuff. And it came to pass when Abiathar, the son of Abimelech, remember I said that Abimelech's son got away from the slaughter? Well, that was Abiathar, and he escaped from the slaughter back at Nob with Saul, and he took off. And if you recall last week, we talked about that Jewish ephod. Remember the ephod? We went into discussion of the ephod. I never did find if they were white stones or black stones or white marbles or black I don't know. I know that you want white marbles, not black marbles. And it came to pass when Abiathar, the son of Abimelech, fled to David to Keilah, that he came down with the ephod in his hand. Now this is a powerful instrument of God that he has in his hand. It's not like good mojo. It's nothing like that. It's something that God had them make, and it is an instrument of judgment, an instrument of guidance. It's an instrument of God. And when Abimelech, when he hightailed it out, when he saw his father and his mother and his brothers and all the people getting killed, and he split, and he got out of there. He grabbed the ephod. He knew the importance of the ephod, because that's where the judgment of God is when you have a question that needs an answer from God. So he grabs it, and he's down here at Keilah with David. And somebody told Saul that David was down here in Keilah. In verse 7, and Saul said, God hath delivered him into mine hand, for he is shut in by entering into a town that hath gates and bars. Now Saul has him. He's been chasing him, and now he's got him. He knows right where he is, and he knows that at night they close the gates, and they slide the bolts in there, and they lock the gates up, and they go over yonder to the entrance, and they shut the gates, and they slide the bolts in there, and they lock it up, and they can't get out, because you can't get in, but you can't get out. And now Saul says, now I've got David right where I want him. Well, just about. I ain't got him in my hands yet, but I know where he is, and I know he's locked in. So let's move. In verse 8, Saul called all the people together to war, to go down to Keilah to besiege David and his men. And David knew that Saul secretly practiced mischief against him. That's a real fancy way of saying he knows that Saul is plotting to get him. Practice mischief sounds like something, a little boy would do by tying the girl's pigtails into a knot on the chair in front of him in school, which I never was tempted to do. I just didn't have the courage, but I was tempted. And David heard about it. And he says to Abiathar, the priest. Now remember, Abiathar's dad was the priest, and in his death, now Abiathar is the priest, because that's the way it worked. Past tense. It's because daddy was a preacher. Doesn't mean son's going to be a preacher. Doesn't mean that. Just because daddy's a preacher doesn't mean that all the preachers' kids are going to be bad kids either. Doesn't mean that. Some of them are. Or were. He says to Abiathar, he says, bring the ephod. Go back to your tent, wherever. Bring the ephod down here, because this is getting serious now. Then David said, O Lord God of Israel, thy servant has certainly heard that Saul seeketh to come to Keilah to destroy the city for my sake. And then he asked God this question. Now these are the same guys that are supposed to go with him to fight the Philistines. They're already saying, wait a minute. Now this is not his group of soldiers, but these are the people in the city that he went down to save. Remember, he went down to save them because the Philistines were ripping them off and slaying them and abusing them. He goes down with his group and he saves them, and he runs off the Philistines, and he takes all the booty, and he probably gave it to the city of Keilah, because what's he going to do with it? He's on the run. And now he goes to God again, and he asks God. He's got the ephod. Remember, it's the instrument of judgment, the instrument of decision. And he goes to God and he says, God, are these guys at Keilah, are they gonna betray me? We did save them. Are they gonna betray me? Will they deliver me into the hand of Saul? Will Saul come down, as I've heard? O Lord God, in verse 11 of Israel, I beseech thee, tell thy servant. And the Lord said, he will come down. And that's when David says, well, will these men deliver me to Saul? Will they betray me? And the Lord said, they will deliver thee up. Man, he's given all the answers to all the questions, and they're not answers that David really wants to hear. I would like to hear, yeah, they're coming, but I got you covered. These folks are going to stand up, but God tells him flat out, no, they're going to turn you over, man. They're going to just turn you in. Boy, talking about a payback. Verse 13, then David and his men said, and his men, which were about 600, arose, and they left. They left Keilah, and they went whithersoever. They went as far as they could, is what that means. And it was told Saul that David was escaped from Keilah, and he forbore to go forth. So he went, David went that way. So Saul goes after him. He's not in Keilah. He got out of there through God's providence in his hand. And now he's gone. Saul hears about it. Man, he almost had him. He was right on his tail. He almost had him. And he got away again. Saul has to be so frustrated and so beside himself and so angry every time he hears the name David. He shakes his hand to God in heaven. I'll kill him. Verse 14, and David abode in the wilderness in the strongholds and remained in a mountain in the wilderness of Ziph. And Saul sought him every day, but God delivered him not into his hand. You know, sometimes you can feel the heat from the devil's breath on the back of your neck because he's really after you. But God, and I don't think we see, I think that we are going to be so surprised when we stand before God. And I'm imagining, kind of in my mind, it's a big screen TV, and you got, this is your life. And I don't think it's really going to be like that. But I think we're going to be surprised the times that God snatched us right away from the evil that the devil was going, whether we're going to get hurt or whatever, something, and God, just snatched us away from that. And we didn't even know the devil was that close. We grew up kind of out, at that time we grew up out in the country. There were farms out there and farmers, with their plowing, and we spent a lot of time, Mark and my younger brother and all the guys that we hung out with, we spent a lot of time back in the woods. Now my older brother Ron, who's younger than Phil, he's between the two of us, he would take me back in the woods, and he taught me how to drink from the creek. Back then you could. It was pretty clear, and they always drink before the water's running, And so, and I thought, well, this guy knows everything. So I would be down, and I'm down, and I'm, he stops, he gets a drink. Now he probably scooped it up in his hand from the creek, but I'm about, 8, 9 years old, so I don't scoop it up. I'm down on my hands and knees, and I'm lapping the water up like a dog, okay? I don't know. I'm a kid. And all of this, and I'm not looking around. I'm watching the water. What Ron saw that I didn't see was it was a crawdad. And now when you're a 8 or 9 year old boy, a crawdad is this big. It's that long, and it has pincers that will bite your nose right off. And Ron saw this crawdad crawling up to my face, and he was reaching up to get my lip, which would have just scared me half to death. And he reaches down, and he snatches that crawdad up, and he slams it on the rock, and I had no clue what was going on. I think we're going to see that God did that a lot of times for us. Snatched us before the old crawdad of the devil came and clamped on us. I still remember that. That was way, way back. David's hiding out. Verse 15 said David saw that he knew that Saul was coming to get him, and David was in the wilderness. He's hiding out in the woods. And in verse 16, we see Jonathan again, Saul's son. Jonathan comes, and he's going to renew this covenant with David. This, as far as we know, is the last time that David and Jonathan meet while Jonathan's alive. Because in chapter 31 or 32, Jonathan's going to get killed. But he comes to where David is. He is the son's king, and Daddy is looking for David, but Jonathan, because they've got this bond between them like brothers. And he comes to where David is, and he wants to read, he wants to, and look at verse 18, and they two made a covenant before the Lord, and David abode in the wood, and Jonathan went to his house. So Jonathan came back down, and he has a conversation with David. And he just wants to renew. He wants to make sure, David, I want you to understand that it's not me that's chasing you. I am your friend, and I want to renew this covenant that we have. And then he goes away. The next time David sees Jonathan, Jonathan has been killed in battle. Then came the Ziphites to Saul, to Gibeah, saying, doth not David hide himself with us in strongholds in the woods, in the hills of Haliah, which is on the south side of Jezimon? Yeah, these guys are giving him up again. Hey, Saul, isn't David hiding down with us? Well, yeah, he is. Verse 20, now therefore, O king, come down according to all the desire of thy soul to come down, and our part shall be to deliver them into the king's hand. David cannot catch a break. No matter where he goes, people are turning their back on him. And these folks here gave him up to, just like the men at Keilah did, these folks here are going to give him up. And they said, Saul, All you got to do is come on down to where we're at. We'll catch him. We'll deliver him to you, or we'll take you to where he is, and you can do as you wish with him. And Saul said in verse 21, Blessed be ye of the Lord, for ye have compassion on me. It's all about Saul at this point. Verse 22, he tells him, Go, do this thing. Go find him, verify he's there, and we'll come and get him. He tells him in verse 23, See therefore, and take knowledge of all of the lurking places where he hideth himself, and come ye to me again with certainty, and I will go with you, and it shall come to pass, if he be in your land, that I will search him out through all the thousands of Judah. And they arose, and they went to Ziph before Saul. But David and his men, they were gone already. They were in the wilderness of Maon, in the plain on the south of Jezimon. And Saul's after him again. So you say, well, when does this end? How long does he chase him? Well, it's about to end here real quick. David goes down, he hides in a cave. Go to chapter 24, and it came to pass when Saul was returned from following with the Philistines. See, the Philistines came back, and Saul had to put a hold on his search for David and do what he's supposed to do as the king, and he went and he fought the Philistines. And then when he subdued them, he's back on track, and he's after David again. Then Saul took 3,000 chosen men out of all of Israel, in verse 2 of chapter 24. And he went to seek David and his men upon the rocks and of the wild goats. He is turning over every nook and cranny looking for David. And he came to the sheepcotes by the way, and there was a cave. So the sheep herders would herd the sheep in there in the evening and block them off, and they'd be safe in there. And there's a cave there. So, they could always put the sheep in the cave if the bears or the wolves or the jackals or the whatevers was after them. And Saul knows that that's where David is. And David and his men remained in the sides of the cave. And the men of David said, Behold, the day which the Lord said unto thee, Behold, I will deliver thine enemy into thine hand, that thou mayest do to him as it shall seem good to thee. Well, here's what happened. Then David arose, and he cut off the skirt of Saul's robe privately. Here's what happened. David's on one side of the mountain, and Saul and his men are on the other side of the mountain. And Saul goes in to use the restroom. He goes in to relieve himself in private. So he goes back into this cave. He goes back alone because he wants privacy. He doesn't know that David's in that same cave. Now, David has a decision. I can ignore him, or I could kill him, and I'll ascend to the throne faster. But this was God's anointed at one time. So David has a dilemma. Look at verse 5. Because David's thinking, so close. And it came to pass afterward that David's heart smote him because he'd cut off Saul's skirt. What he had done, he'd cut off just a corner of his priestly robe that he wore. You say, well, what's it? Here's what that means. To touch the king's garment is the same as touching the king. To cut a part or to damage that garment has the same penalty as if you had attacked the king physically. So David was close enough that he cuts off the hem or the corner of his garment, and he slinks back into the darkness of the cave, and the king has no idea. He's finished his business. He goes back out. Look at verse 6. And he said to his men, the Lord forbid that I should do this thing unto my master, the Lord's anointed, to stretch forth my hand against him, seeing he is the anointed of the Lord. Even though God took his blessing, he was still anointed of the Lord. And David respected that. Now, if I knew that the guy that's trying to kill me and going to all ends to kill me, and I've got him right there, as a man, I'm going to kill that dude. Because he's going to kill me if I don't kill him. So it's kill or be killed. But David has enough respect for Saul and his position of authority that he one time had. He knew that he was God's anointed. He cuts that piece off, and he's going to use that piece to make peace. And when David's men said, why in the world didn't you just stab him? Why didn't you kill him? Why didn't you take a club and bash his brains in? David said, I just couldn't. That's God's man. That's God's anointed. I can't raise my hand to him. And it calmed the guys down. They said, well, okay. They understood Jewish custom. They understood all about the king, and they probably didn't like it, but they understood. And in verse 8, David comes out of the cave, and Saul comes out of the cave, and there's some distance in between them. And David yells out to Saul. He calls attention to himself. Again, that's chutzpah. But verse 8, David also arose afterward and went out of the cave, and he cried after Saul, saying, my Lord the king! Saul didn't even know he was around, and he cries out, my Lord the king! And he's out in the right in the open. There's no hiding now. Saul has 3,000 soldiers that he brought for the sole task of finding and killing David and then annihilating his group. I would imagine somebody in that crowd of 600 that was with David was going, shut up, shh, what are you doing? Maybe you don't care about your life, but I do. David, what are you doing? David's out there, oh, Lord, my king, hey. What are you thinking? And then he bows his face to the earth, and he stoops down. He doesn't just bow. He gets down on the ground, and, he is completely at the mercy of Saul. Even though there's some distance, he is at the mercy of Saul. He has laid his arms down. He has stretched himself out before his king. This could go bad, David. And David said to Saul, where have you heard the words that I'm trying to hurt you? Who told you? That's what verse 9 is saying. Who told you that I'm trying to hurt you? Where did you get this idea? Where did you come to that conclusion? What have I done that made you think that I was out to hurt you? And it's a reasonable question. Rather than duke it out, let's settle it. Who told you I was trying to do this? In verse 10, behold, these days thine eyes have seen how the Lord hath delivered thee today unto mine hand in a cave. David says, I got to tell you something, Saul. God brought you into that cave. He set you down right close enough for me to reach out, and I could either stab you or I could cut off a piece of your garment. I was that close to you, Saul. Who told you I was trying to hurt you? I was close enough to you in that cave where I could have killed you. And some of my guys wanted me to kill you. But I spared you. And I said, I will not put forth mine hand against the Lord, for he is the Lord's anointed. And then he holds up that piece of cloth that he has. And we're going to close with it. He holds up that piece of cloth. And it's all finely embroidered. You know, it's fit for a king. And he holds up that piece of cloth that he cut off. And I would imagine that Saul and those around him recognized that piece of clothing. And he probably looked down and he pulled his garments around and he lifts it up and he sees that goes here. And I would imagine a cold chill would go over Saul's body as he realized how close he came to slipping into eternity by the hand of a man that he considered his enemy. But it's just because God had anointed him that his life was spared. David says, I couldn't put my hand on you in there. Verse 11, moreover, my father, see the skirt of thy robe in my hand, for in that I cut off the skirt of thy robe and killed thee not. I want you to know and I want you to see that there is neither evil nor transgression in mine hand, and I have not sinned against you, yet you hunt my soul to take it. David says, I'm willing to let the Lord judge between us. I'm not even going to judge you. I'm going to let the Lord do it. We're going to stop. Now, Saul is going to be out of the picture here pretty soon. Samuel is going to be out of the picture here pretty soon. Jonathan's going to be out of the picture pretty soon. David's going to soldier on. But he's going to be without his mentor, his king, and his very best friend. And God's going to preserve him all the way up to do great things through David. We may go through battles. We may get whipped a lot. Man, a lot we're going to get whipped. But ultimately, we're going to step through on the other side, and there'll be no more battles for us, health-wise, family-wise, money-wise, trouble-wise. We're going to step through into the other side, and all of that, the minutia of life as a human, will be over. Our enemies will be gone. The main enemy, the devil, will be gone. And at that point, we will enter into God's glory. And that sounds gooder and gooder the closer and closer I get to it. I know gooder and gooder is not, but you know what I mean. It just sounds a whole lot better than what we're in and what we're facing.